thank you for this overview, because with this overview, you gave us a guideline actually how to listen to presentations from our 3 representatives of banks today, because this is actually the framework in which they operate their programs. So I would like to continue with the presentation from Ekaterina Galitsyna. Ekaterina is representative of the bank KfW, a German development bank, a bank from the German government, one of the world's leading development banks. I read that you provided 167 billion in 2022 alone. 1/3 of it was used for climate and environmental protection. But when I got the presentation from you, I saw that you represent KfW IPEX-Bank. So for me, it was not really clear what kind of subsidiary are you in this holding KfW. So I would like you to tell us the place of your bank on the overall structure, and what are your strategies and eligibility criteria.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nadežda. Could you please share my presentation as well?
Just a second.
Yeah, thank you very much. As already mentioned through Nadežda, I am from the KfW banking group, and I'm responsible for the activities of KfW IPEX-Bank. And IPEX stands for International Project and Export Finance. Mm-hmm. So KfW is a German state-owned bank, and we promote Germany, of course, with different products, with different in different sectors, I would say, but we are still very active internationally, and we have our 3 aims, I would say so, like KfW Development Bank. It's all about development countries and countries with transition economy. Then we have our, could you please go to the next slide, please? So this is the structure of the KfW exactly. So, and then you can see on the right side, this development aid, we finance development. This is about KfW Development Bank, where we are working only on the governmental level with the governments of the guest countries. And then we have our another subsidiary, KfW, in the structure of KfW DG. This stands for the supporting of private sector in developing countries. So, as already mentioned, I'm from the KfW IPEX-Bank. So we support the German and the European economy, and we can work with the both, with the governmental institutions and with the private sector. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So exactly, we as KfW IPEX-Bank, we are state-owned and belongs to the KfW banking group, and we have our special mandate to support the export industry, to support the infrastructure and transport projects. Of course, very big topic for us is environmental and climate protection and securing raw materials supplies. So it's all about very CapEx intensive sectors. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So you can see that we as KfW banking group, we are the safest bank in the world. And as KfW IPEX-Bank, we are one of the best banks as for export and project finance. So please go to the next slide. Exactly. And here it's another slide about our sectors where we are active. And you can see that indeed the projects in power, environmental resources and recycling, infrastructure. This is a very big topic in our financing. And you can see that we are working on these very CapEx intensive projects with our special product, long-term financing. And I think, speaking about the region, Central Asia, this is most important for such countries to get the long-term financing. Could you please go to the next slide? Exactly. As for the products, how can we be sure that this long-term financing would be provided? Normally, we use the ECA-backed financing. So we go through this export credit agencies cover. Then we are in the framework of OECD consensus. Of course, we have another instruments like trade and commodity finance, project and asset financing. We are working together with international financial institutions, like already mentioned through Stefano. We are working very closely together with European Investment Bank and with EBRD, of course, with other development banks, which are very, very active in the region. So could you please go to the next slide? So once again, this is about our projects, our instruments, like we can do corporate finance, we can do, of course, project finance, structured finance, asset financing, ECA-backed financing. Very important is that we can provide on lending of KfW promotion loans, of course, and we are working normally in the countries like Central Asia with two structures. We can go with the clients directly in direct financing, or we can use the on lending structure, of course, through the local banks. Could you please go to the next slide? So, and then these are my thoughts about this potential for Central Asia. What can we see? And as I can assume, you have already discussed a lot of these particular topics in the first session with Marat. Now the Central Asia has the framework conditions in most countries, where we see that the government of the countries is doing a lot of work, a lot of potential developments for attracting their investors to the region. So we can see the most framework conditions are there in Central Asia. Then we can see, of course, this big variety of stakeholders. Of course, we see a lot of investments already from the Gulf countries. We see a lot of activities of Chinese companies and Chinese investors in Central Asia. Then we see still a lot of further investments from the Russian companies. And now where we are supporting the European companies and where we can see the activities, we see this in particular countries like Uzbekistan and in Kazakhstan. And I think you will discuss a very interesting big project in the last session. This is the project of Svevind company. This is a German-based company, and they are now very active, this very ambitious project in Kazakhstan. As for Uzbekistan, we are discussing some interesting projects in solar sector with German companies like Meyer Burger and other companies. So I think this is a very, very good possibility for further investors to go to the region. Because if a lot of stakeholders, a lot of investors are there, this is a proof for further investments, of course. So the next point from my side is, please stay on the same slide, please. So this possibility to implement the best available technologies. And I think this is very important, yeah, because you don't need to do the steps what, for example, Europe and other countries did in the past to go to these best available technologies. The Central Asia region has now this possibility just to use all the best available technologies from European countries, from other countries. And of course, you have in the Central Asia these great possibilities for localization in the region and to establish such hubs, for example. The next topic is that this interesting combination of international financial institutions,
Ekaterina.
the variety of investors. Sorry?
No, we lost you for a second. Yes, now
okay.
We can hear you.
So you see here this very interesting combination, because you see here a lot of international financial institutions which are presented in the region. Then you see a lot of commercial banks which are operating worldwide, and very different investors. And I think this is a unique situation here in the Central Asia, that you can combine all of these opportunities in the region. And of course, thanks to that, you have here in the Central Asia well-developed variety of possible financial instruments and their combinations, where you can where you can combine these possibilities, for example, to use the financing from EBRD and EIB, and then from commercial banks, yeah. And this is, I think, really very unique situation where you can combine all of these instruments. So, and let's go to the next slide. So, exactly. So, why ECA? Because, as already mentioned, ECA, like Export Credit Agency cover, enables for the banks this long-term financing. Because if you have this cover from top countries, like in Germany, we have Julia Hermes, in other countries, we have other export credit agencies to support the export of the country. Then you have, of course, this possibility for the banks like us to go in long-term financing. And we as KfW IPEX-Bank, we have our best relationships not only with Julia Hermes, which is, as already mentioned, the German export credit agency for supporting the German economy. We have best relations with about 20 export credit agencies to support the economies from these countries, the most European countries. So, and of course, this is all in the framework of OECD consensus. And as you may know, there are some new rules starting from July 15th, that for climate-friendly projects, yeah, it will be a very attractive condition to go for long-term cover. I think it would be till 22 years possible to cover such projects. It means that the banks, the commercial banks like us in this case, that we can provide the countries like in Central Asia, the governmental structures or the private companies or the project finance structures with this really long-term financing, like 22 years for climate-friendly projects. So, and let's go to the next slide, please. So this is about the structure, how we can use this ECA cover finance. We have, for example, an European exporter, and we have the local buyer. And on the left side, you see this export credit agency. So in this case, the export credit agency can cover the risk of the local buyer, so that we as KfW IPEX-Bank can provide this local buyer with long-term financing. And the European exporter could be competitive on the market if the European exporter can offer to the local buyer not only these services, but the financing as well. And we have another scheme on the next slide where you have not only, could you please go to the next slide? Where you have, for example, another stakeholder in this scheme, like local bank, which would be the borrower on the local market from us. This is the same scheme, but if, for example, the local buyer, the company in Central Asia, is not ready to attract the financing directly from the Western bank, then we can go through the local bank and provide the local bank with this on-lending structure.
Ekaterina, I think thank you very much for this detailed explanation. I think it's very relevant. I would just like to ask you, just if I understood correctly, your bank is participating in the SVEVINT project on hydrogen. You can maybe close the presentation now.
No, it's not. I think it's the early phase of this project SVEVINT, but these are the projects which we are considering on the market. Yes, for now we see that this is this very interesting initiative with this SVEVINT project, because it's not only about wind farms in Kazakhstan, it's about hydrogen projects. Yes. It's very interesting, and I think till the colleagues from SVEVINT will develop the project, it takes some time, of course, but still it's very interesting for this really long-term financing. And another possibility is for European companies to localize in the region, of course. And we are discussing now some such projects in Uzbekistan, for example.
Thank you.